My name is Serafina, but everyone calls me Sarah. I'm 38 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the person my family turns to when things fall apart. The quiet fixer, the structural engineer of our family's fragile facade. But in their eyes, especially when an audience was present, I was something else entirely. Last Saturday night, at my parents' lavish 50th wedding anniversary, my father stood before a room filled with their closest friends and relatives, raised a crystal flute of champagne, and called me his failure. He smiled as he said it, a charming, self-deprecating little joke for the crowd. But there was no joke. Hours later, in that same silk dress, I sat alone in my silent office and watched my name flash across a screen as the winner of the National Vanguard Award for Architecture. What my family didn't know was that this award didn't just come with a heavy bronze trophy. It came with a check for $250,000. And more importantly, it came with the key to a vault I had built 5 years ago. A secret they had long forgotten that was about to bring their entire world crashing down. If you've ever felt like your greatest accomplishments were invisible to the very people who should have been cheering you on the loudest, drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Before I tell you what happened when they discovered the truth about the money, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is a story about the true cost of family, the price of secrets, and the precise moment you decide to stop paying for their mistakes. Growing up in the manicured suburbs of Westchester, my life's blueprint was supposedly drawn out for me. My parents, Edward and Helen, were masters of illusion. They presented themselves as pillars of the community, paragons of financial prudence and social grace. My father was a financial advisor at a boutique firm, a man who spoke with unwavering confidence about market trends and portfolio diversification. My mother's full-time job was the curation of their flawless image, from the perfectly arranged hydrangeas in the front yard to the carefully selected guests at their dinner parties. Their values were simple and absolute: stability, predictability, and, above all, the appearance of effortless success. My younger brother, Leo, was their masterpiece. He was the golden child, the one who never deviated from the plan. He got a business degree from a respectable university, married his college sweetheart, Tiffany, a woman who shared my mother's devotion to appearances, and immediately took a promising job at my father's firm. He was their legacy, a perfect reflection of their values. I, on the other hand, was their architectural anomaly. I didn't want to analyze stock charts. I wanted to analyze the play of light across a concrete surface. I didn't dream of profit margins. I dreamt of clean lines, sustainable materials, and the profound way a physical space could shape human experience. The day I announced my intention to study architecture, the foundation of our family home seemed to tremble. My father sat me down in his leather-bound study, the air thick with the smell of old books and disappointment. Architecture? Serafina, that's a charming hobby, not a profession, he'd said, his voice laced with a weary condescension. It's a fool's game. Years of expensive schooling to become a glorified draftsperson, begging for scraps from developers. Go into finance or law. Something respectable. Something stable. My mother's reaction was a dagger to the heart. What are we supposed to tell the Abernathys? She'd lamented, wringing her hands. Their daughter just made partner at her law firm, and ours wants to spend her life playing with little building blocks. Their disapproval was a wall I couldn't break through, so I decided to build around it. I held firm. I took out student loans, worked 3 part-time jobs waitressing, tutoring, and cataloging slides in the university's art library, and refused their conditional financial support. My passion was the one thing that felt truly mine, a private world they couldn't touch or tarnish. For years, our relationship was a carefully negotiated truce. I built my career from the ground up, starting as an intern at a small, innovative firm in the city before taking the terrifying leap of starting my own practice. Leo, meanwhile, was effortlessly promoted to a junior partnership at my father's firm. He and Tiffany bought a sprawling colonial in the best part of town, drove matching luxury SUVs, and took exotic, Instagram-worthy vacations, all while I was pouring every penny I earned back into my fledgling business, living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a noisy bakery. Their lives were a performance of success. My life was the quiet, unglamorous reality of building something from nothing. Then, 5 years ago, the stage collapsed. The truth came out, not in a dramatic exposé, but in a series of quiet, devastating implosions. It turned out my father wasn't a financial wizard. He was a reckless gambler who had been making high-risk, speculative investments with his clients' money, and worse, with the firm's capital. Leo, desperate to live up to the golden child mantle, had secretly launched a disastrous tech startup, funding it with a massive, unapproved loan from the firm's accounts. When the market took a downturn and the startup's app something about rating artisanal dog food failed spectacularly, everything came apart at once. The firm went bankrupt in a matter of weeks. The clients sued. The SEC launched an investigation. And their beautiful colonial, the very symbol of their success, went into foreclosure. They were ruined, utterly and completely. And in their moment of total desperation, they turned to me. The failure, the hobbyist, the daughter who played with building blocks. I'll never forget the night my mother called me. Her voice, usually so controlled and imperious, was fractured with a panic I'd never heard before. "We're losing the house, Sarah. The auction is in 2 weeks. We have nowhere to go. We'll be on the street." A part of me, a small, dark, and wounded part, wanted to say no. I wanted to remind them of every dismissive comment, every belittling remark, every time they'd made me feel small and insignificant. But I couldn't. They were my parents. So, I did something drastic, something I never told a soul besides my lawyer. I liquidated my entire investment portfolio, the one I had painstakingly built since my first paying job. I took out a high-interest business loan against my firm's future earnings, a move that put my own dreams at immense risk, and I bought their house back at the foreclosure auction. The deed was transferred solely and legally into my name. To save them from the ultimate humiliation, I concocted a lie. I told them I had a contact at a private equity firm who had arranged a complex leaseback program, allowing them to stay in the house while the bank sorted out their finances. They, along with Leo, Tiffany, and their 2 young children, continued to live there, blissfully unaware. I moved into the small, drafty guest house on the property, which I converted into my combination office and living space. From that day forward, I became their ghost. I was their silent, invisible benefactor. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property taxes. I paid the utilities. I gave Leo a generous monthly stipend so he could rebuild his career, a process that was now entering its 5th year with no end in sight. They saw none of it. In their minds, they had cleverly navigated a temporary setback. They convinced themselves that some benevolent, faceless institution was covering their expenses, a narrative so much more palatable than the truth, that their failure of a daughter was the only thing standing between them and utter ruin. The injustice was a constant, low hum in my life, the background radiation of my existence. I'd watch them uncork a $100 bottle of wine at a restaurant dinner I was paying for, only to have my father lecture me, with patronizing authority, on how I should be more practical with my little business. For their 49th anniversary, I spent weeks designing and building a beautiful, custom walnut sideboard for their dining room, my hands raw from the work. They unwrapped it, gave a polite, lukewarm, "Oh, that's very rustic, dear," and then spent the rest of the evening showing off the new diamond earrings my father had bought my mother with the money I had given them. They had no idea that their entire world was a stage I had built and was paying to maintain. And they made it clear, day after day, that they had absolutely no respect for the architect of their salvation. I told myself I could endure it, that keeping the family from shattering completely was worth the 1,000 tiny cuts to my spirit. I had no idea their ingratitude was about to escalate from private dismissals to a humiliating public execution that would finally force me to burn the whole rotten stage to the ground. The catalyst arrived on a dreary Tuesday in October, not with a bang, but with the quiet slit of a letter opener. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope, heavy with importance, bearing the official crest of the American Architectural Guild. My hands, usually so steady with a drafting pen, trembled slightly as I slid the letter out. I had submitted my Crestwood River Library project for the annual Vanguard Award months ago, a move that felt more like buying a lottery ticket than a serious bid. It was the absolute pinnacle of my field, a career-defining honor, the architectural equivalent of a Nobel Prize, given to a single architect whose work demonstrated bold innovation, profound community impact, and a mastery of sustainable design. Simply being considered was an honor. My eyes scanned the dense, formal paragraph, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Then, the world seemed to slow down. I saw the words, etched in elegant black ink. After a rigorous selection process by our esteemed jury, we are absolutely delighted to inform you that you have been selected as one of the 3 finalists for this year's National Vanguard Award. A wave of vertigo, a dizzying blend of disbelief and pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. I stumbled back into my worn desk chair, the letter clutched in my hand. I read it again, then a third time, tracing the words with my finger as if to confirm they were real. For over a decade, my work had been my sanctuary, the one place where my voice was clear, where my vision mattered. This nomination was more than just professional recognition. It was a profound validation of every sleepless night spent hunched over blueprints, every personal sacrifice, every time I'd politely declined a social invitation because of a deadline. It was irrefutable proof that my hobby, my little drawings, had substance and significance. After a lifetime of my family's quiet condescension, here was the loudest, most respected voice in my entire industry, telling me, in no uncertain terms, that I was not a failure. My very first instinct, a deeply ingrained and foolish reflex, was to share the news. Despite years of evidence to the contrary, a small, stubborn part of me still held out hope for their approval. I thought, this is it. This is the thing they can't diminish. This will finally make them see me. That evening, I walked the short path from my guest house to the main house, the letter feeling as sacred as a holy text in my hand. They were in the family room, a perfect tableau of their life. My father engrossed in the Wall Street Journal, my mother circling items in a high-end home decor catalog, and Leo watching a football game on the massive 80-inch flat-screen TV I had paid for as a housewarming gift to myself when I moved into the guest house. "I have some exciting news," I announced, my voice trembling with a nervous energy that sounded, even to my own ears, a little too bright. My mother looked up from her catalog, a flicker of irritation in her eyes at being disturbed. "What is it, Serafina? I hope it's not another issue with the guest house's fickle water heater. We have guests coming this weekend." "No, it's really good news," I said, extending the letter to her. "I'm a finalist for the National Vanguard Award." She took the letter, her eyes gliding over it with the same fleeting interest she might give to a coupon for dry cleaning. "Oh, the Vanguard Award. How nice, dear." She passed it to my father as if it were contaminated with mediocrity, her attention already drifting back to a page featuring a ridiculously expensive Italian sofa. My father lowered his newspaper and put on his reading glasses. He read the letter, his expression unreadable. He let out a small, almost imperceptible grunt. "Well, I suppose it's always good to be recognized for your efforts, even in a niche field like yours." He folded the letter neatly and set it on the table beside him. "Is there a cash prize?" The question felt like a splash of cold water. "The grand prize for the winner is $250,000, I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. Leo snorted from the couch, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Good luck with that, Sarah. You're probably up against huge international firms from New York and LA. Seriously, don't get your hopes up. It's a long shot." And that was it. The entire celebration. No congratulations, no questions about the project I had poured my soul into. Not a single flicker of genuine pride. My existence, my achievement, was immediately and effortlessly translated into their language. Money and status. And even then, it was dismissed as an unlikely long shot. My mother immediately pivoted. "Speaking of finances, Edward, did you see the quarterly property tax bill? It's gone up again. It's simply outrageous." She then turned her gaze to me, her tone shifting seamlessly from dismissal to complaint. "Serafina, You might need to speak to your contact at that bank program about that. And Leo was just telling me that with the twins' new private school fees, his stipend is feeling a bit tight this month. We should probably sit down and discuss a cost of living adjustment. Oh, I just stood there, frozen, the letter on the table looking like a worthless piece of junk mail. They had taken my singular moment of triumph, the culmination of my life's work, and in less than 60 seconds, had converted it into a mundane financial transaction, a simple reminder of my primary function in their lives, their provider. The emotional whiplash was staggering. I was a celebrated architect to the rest of the world, but in this house, I was just the plumbing, the bank, the ever-present but utterly invisible support system. The pain of their dismissal was a familiar, bitter ache I had learned to swallow. But this time, it felt different. It felt like a warning. They were in the midst of planning their 50th anniversary party for the following month. A grand, ostentatious affair designed to broadcast their supposed resilience and unwavering success to their entire social circle. The date of the party, by a stroke of cruel irony, was the exact same night as the Vanguard Awards ceremony in Los Angeles. I knew I wouldn't be able to attend the ceremony in person, but I clung to the faint hope that, win or lose, the nomination itself might finally earn me a sliver of their respect. Their cold, transactional reaction that evening should have been my final clue. It wasn't just dismissal. It was a deliberate reinforcement of the narrative they had constructed for me. And at their party, in front of everyone they knew, they were about to carve that narrative in stone, using my heart as the chisel. The weeks leading up to my parents' golden anniversary party were a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged with polite smiles and passive-aggressive maneuvers. The tension in the house, already a constant, low-frequency hum, amplified into a suffocating, high-pitched whine. With the event looming, my family's obsession with projecting an image of flawless success went into overdrive, and my role as the invisible, utilitarian daughter became more painfully clear than ever. Every interaction felt like a small, deliberate paper cut, insignificant on its own, but collectively designed to bleed me dry of patience, dignity, and hope. The first incident, a blatant act of trespass, occurred about 2 weeks before the party. I was working late in my guest house office, sketching out a concept for a new community center, completely absorbed in my work. The door opened without a knock, and my sister-in-law, Tiffany, breezed in. She was holding up a delicate, vintage sapphire necklace against her throat, admiring her reflection in the dark window of my office. "What do you think?" she asked, striking a pose as if she were on a red carpet. "I think this will be absolutely perfect with my silver gown for the party. It brings out my eyes, don't you think?" My blood ran cold. It wasn't just any necklace. It was my grandmother Rose's, the only piece of genuine fine jewelry I owned, bequeathed to me specifically and pointedly in her will. My grandmother had understood my artistic soul, and this necklace was my one tangible connection to her memory. I had worn it exactly once, to my university graduation, and otherwise kept it safely tucked away in a velvet-lined box in my dresser. "Tiffany, where did you get that?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Oh, I was looking for some Advil and your top drawer was open, so I took a peek in your jewelry box. I figured you wouldn't mind, Sarah. You never wear it. And it's an absolute crime for something so beautiful to just sit in a dark drawer." She said it so breezily, with such an air of casual entitlement, as if she were borrowing a scarf. There was no apology, no acknowledgement that she had rifled through my personal belongings in my private space. "I do mind, Tiffany," I said, standing up from my desk, my body rigid. "That is incredibly personal to me. It was my grandmother's. Please take it off." She rolled her eyes, a look of profound exasperation on her perfectly made-up face. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Serafina. It's just for one night. Honestly, you're making a huge deal out of nothing." She didn't take it off. She simply turned with a flounce and walked out, the sapphire, my grandmother Rose's sapphire, still glittering around her neck. I was so stunned by the sheer audacity that I was left speechless. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was a symbol of their philosophy. They took what they wanted, without permission, and then skillfully framed my objection as an emotional overreaction. The second cut came a week later, this time from my father. My parents were finalizing the details with the catering company and, as was their custom, had gone wildly over budget. I came home from a dusty, 10-hour site visit to find my father waiting for me at the entrance to my guest house, holding an invoice like a summons. "The caterer needs the final deposit," he said, thrusting the paper at me. His tone was clipped, impatient. "It's $5,000. "Oh, I've already contributed $10,000 for the venue and the decorations, Dad," I reminded him, trying to keep my voice steady. We agreed that was my full contribution to the party. He let out a long, theatrical sigh, the sound of a deeply burdened man dealing with an unreasonable, selfish child. "Serafina, this is our 50th wedding anniversary. It is a milestone. It's about celebrating this family's legacy, a legacy of resilience." He gestured vaguely toward the main house. "Your brother has done his part, you know. He spent all afternoon helping with the guest list and the seating chart, a task that, I knew for a fact, had consisted of him emailing a list of his golf buddies to my mother. "We just need you to cover this one last thing. Don't make this difficult." The phrase, "don't make this difficult," was his favorite weapon, a verbal tool of manipulation he had honed over decades. It was a neat little package that meant, don't have boundaries, don't say no to me, don't question my authority. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. I didn't have the energy to fight another battle I knew I would lose. I took the invoice, went inside, and transferred the money from my business account, the feeling of bitter resentment burning in my stomach like acid. Later that evening, as I was making myself a simple dinner, I overheard him on the phone with my Uncle David, his voice booming with false pride. "Yes, everything's paid for and taken care of. Leo and I have it all under control. It's going to be the event of the season, a real testament to this family. Not a single word about my contribution. My role was to provide the resources, never to receive the credit." The final straw before the party involved my brother, Leo. He approached me one afternoon with a rare, feigned interest in my work. "Hey, Sarah, I'm working on a little side project, a pitch deck for a potential investor. I need some high-quality graphics. Could I use your firm's subscription to that fancy 3D modeling software for a day or two?" he asked. The software cost several $1,000s a year, a significant business expense for me. Reluctantly, I gave him the login credentials, hoping this might be a small bridge between our worlds. 2 days later, I overheard him complaining to my parents in the kitchen. "That architecture software of Sarah's is a nightmare. It's ridiculously complicated. I can't imagine why anyone would pay for it. I ended up just using a free app on my phone. Honestly, it feels like she just likes to waste money on these expensive toys for her business." My father had nodded in agreement. "That's the art world for you, son. All style, no substance." They were actively devaluing my profession, my tools, and my financial judgment, even as they benefited from the fruits of my labor. The pressure was mounting, and I felt myself withdrawing further into my work, my only solace the upcoming awards ceremony. The date loomed, a tiny, distant island of potential validation in a vast, churning sea of familial disrespect. A few days before the party, I received an unexpected call from Professor Alistair Finch, my former university professor and mentor, a man who was a living legend in the architectural world. "Serafina, I just heard the news about the Vanguard nomination," he said, his voice a warm, gravelly baritone filled with genuine pride. "I am not surprised in the least. The Crestwood Library is a masterpiece of light and form. It's the most exciting and humane piece of public architecture I have seen in a decade. You've earned this, my dear girl." Hearing his words, so full of unreserved admiration, I felt a knot in my throat loosen, and tears welled in my eyes. His simple, heartfelt praise was a shocking contrast to my family's cold, calculated indifference. We talked for half an hour about the project, about the specific challenges of the cantilevered roof, about the community's overwhelming positive response. He saw me. He understood the years of work and the depth of passion behind it. "It's a damn shame the ceremony is the same night as your parents' party," he said before hanging up. "The entire industry will be there, and they'll be wanting to toast you. But I want you to know this. Win or lose, what you have accomplished is monumental. Don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, make you feel that it is anything less. His call was a life raft in a stormy sea. It was the outside voice of reason, the objective confirmation that I wasn't the crazy one. My feelings were valid. The way my family treated me wasn't normal. It was a deeply ingrained pattern of disrespect and exploitation. Hearing it reflected back to me by someone I admired so profoundly gave me a sliver of the strength I didn't yet know I would desperately need. I tried to have one last, peaceful conversation with my mother the day before the party. I found her in the kitchen, directing a florist on the precise placement of a ridiculously large and ostentatious arrangement of white lilies. "Mom, can we talk for just a minute?" I began tentatively. "I'm feeling like there's a lot of tension lately, and I'm a little worried about how things will go tomorrow." "Tension?" She turned to me, her eyebrows arched in perfectly feigned surprise. "I don't feel any tension at all. I feel celebratory. Honestly, Serafina, sometimes I think you go looking for problems where there are none. You have always been so sensitive." And there it was, the final impenetrable wall of denial. My valid concerns were not real. They were a product of my flawed personality. I was too sensitive. I was looking for problems. I was the issue, not their behavior. I retreated to my guest house, the cumulative weight of years of this treatment settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I had tried to be the good daughter, the supportive sister, the quiet fixer. I had swallowed my pride, funded their extravagant lifestyle, and asked for absolutely nothing in return except a tiny sliver of respect. And in return, they had taken my kindness for granted, my silence for weakness, and my success for their own. I went to bed that night with a cold, hard sense of impending doom, a feeling that the carefully constructed facade of our family was about to crack under the immense pressure of their celebration. I just didn't realize that I would be the one they chose to sacrifice to keep it from falling apart. The night of the party was a symphony of glittering falsehoods and carefully orchestrated smiles. The main house, the very structure I had saved from the auction block, was transformed into a stage for their grand performance. Thousands of tiny string lights twinkled in the manicured gardens, a service I paid a landscaper to maintain. A professional string quartet played Vivaldi softly on the stone patio, their considerable fee covered by my last-minute $5,000 contribution. My family moved through the crowd of 100 guests with the practiced ease of royalty, masters of a magnificent illusion that I had single-handedly funded. My father was in his element, a glass of vintage champagne from a case I had bought for the occasion permanently in his hand. He held court with his old business associates and golf buddies, projecting an aura of unflappable success. My mother, draped in a new, ridiculously expensive gown, floated from group to group, graciously accepting compliments on her beautiful home and her impeccable taste. Leo and Tiffany played their roles as the devoted son and daughter-in-law to perfection, looking successful, carefree, and deeply in love. Tiffany was, of course, wearing my grandmother's sapphire necklace. Seeing it sparkle under the soft party lights felt like a personal, deliberate insult every time she passed me. I tried to melt into the background, to become a part of the scenery. I made polite, meaningless small talk with distant cousins and old family friends who asked the same predictable, slightly condescending questions. "Still doing that architecture thing, Serafina? So wonderful that you can work from home. Are you seeing anyone special?" Each question felt loaded, a subtle, societal probe designed to highlight how my life diverged from their accepted definition of success. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, the Vanguard Awards ceremony was underway. The event was being live-streamed, but I kept my phone tucked away, deep inside my purse. I couldn't bear the thought of watching my dream play out, or fail to, in a corner of a party where I felt like a complete ghost. I felt a constant, low-grade anxiety, a relentless thrumming under my skin that was 1 part nervous anticipation about the award and 9 parts suffocating dread about the evening ahead. Around 9 o'clock, my father, with a theatrical flourish, tapped a silver spoon against his crystal flute, calling for everyone's attention. The murmur of the crowd died down, and all eyes turned toward the small, makeshift stage on the patio. It was time for the celebratory toast. "Carol, my love," he began, beaming at my mother, who preened under the attention. 50 years. They say the secret to a long and happy marriage is patience, humor, and a very short memory. He paused, waiting for the polite, appreciative laughter from the crowd. We've faced our challenges. We've weathered our storms together. And through it all, we've raised 2 wonderful children and built a life we can be truly proud of. I felt a bitter, acidic taste rise in my throat. Weathered storms. He spoke as if their financial ruin was a natural disaster, a hurricane that had passed through, not a self-inflicted catastrophe born of his own arrogance and greed. He continued, turning his benevolent gaze to my brother. I couldn't be prouder of my son, Leo. He has faced adversity with incredible resilience and unwavering character. He's a wonderful husband to Tiffany, a devoted father, and a true successor to this family's legacy. Leo puffed out his chest, and Tiffany gazed at him adoringly. The guests applauded warmly, a sea of smiling, approving faces. Then, my father's eyes scanned the crowd and found me. I was standing near the back, partially obscured by a large potted fern. A cold, heavy knot formed in the pit of my stomach. This was it. This was his chance, in front of everyone who mattered to him, to offer a single crumb of validation, a moment of public acknowledgement. And of course, there's our Serafina, he said, and his voice immediately shifted. It became softer, laced with a kind of gentle, patronizing pity that was 1,000 times more insulting than outright anger. She chose a different path, a more artistic one. He chuckled, a small, dismissive sound, and a few people in the crowd chuckled along with him. It hasn't been the easiest road for her, and it certainly wasn't the one we would have chosen for her. But she's making a living with her little drawings, and we're proud of her for that, in her own special way. The air was sucked out of my lungs. Little drawings. He had just reduced my entire life's work, my hard-won firm, my soul-defining passion, the very thing that was keeping him in that house, to a child's idle pastime. But he wasn't finished. He raised his glass higher, a magnanimous, benevolent smile spreading across his face. It just goes to show, every family has its successes. He glanced meaningfully at Leo. And its failures. But the important thing is, we love them all the same. To family. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Failure. He had said it. Not in the privacy of his study, not in a moment of anger, but here, deliberately, as the punchline to his toast. The polite, slightly awkward applause that followed was deafening. I could feel the eyes of my relatives on me, a sea of pity and discomfort. In that single, calculated moment, he had defined me for everyone. I was the family failure, the cautionary tale, the artistic unmarried daughter they had to love anyway. The carefully constructed dam of composure I had maintained for years didn't just crack. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. I saw everything with a blinding, horrifying clarity. They didn't just disrespect me. They were profoundly ashamed of me. My quiet success was an inconvenient truth that disrupted their carefully crafted narrative. So they had to diminish it, reduce it to a hobby, and frame me as a failure to maintain their own fragile sense of superiority. And they did it all while living in my house, eating food I paid for, and wearing jewelry they had stolen from me. I turned and walked away, my legs unsteady, my vision blurring. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away from the sound of their polite laughter, from the sight of their smiling, triumphant faces. I found an empty study off the main hall, pushed the door closed, and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to escape my body. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, suffocating blanket. It was over. Whatever foolish, lingering hope I had for their approval, for a real, loving relationship, died right there on that patio. I was done trying. I was done being their secret. I was done being their failure. As I stood there, trembling with a mixture of white-hot rage and bone-deep grief, my purse vibrated against my hip. I pulled out my phone, my vision still clouded by unshed tears. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but the preview on the lock screen was unmistakable. It was a screenshot of a live newsfeed from Arch Press, the industry's most respected journal. In that moment of absolute, crushing humiliation, I read the 4 words that would change the course of my entire life. Serafina Vance wins Vanguard Award. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, the crisp, digital text, a stark, surreal contrast to the dark, wood-paneled study that felt like a cage. The words didn't seem real, like a headline from an alternate universe. Serafina Vance wins Vanguard Award. A second text buzzed through immediately. It was from Professor Alistair Finch, my mentor. They just announced it. I'm at the ceremony in LA. The entire room is on its feet. The applause is deafening. Call me when you can. You did it, Serafina. My God, you actually did it. A strange, icy calm washed over me, instantly extinguishing the hot, messy fire of my humiliation. It was a cold, crystalline certainty. My father had just stood on a stage and publicly branded me a failure. At that exact moment, 3,000 miles away, the most respected and influential figures in my profession were giving me a standing ovation. The sheer, cosmic, and brutal irony of it was almost too much to comprehend. I clicked the link Alistair had sent. It led to the live stream of the ceremony. I saw the presenter at the podium, a massive, beautifully lit image of my Crestwood River Library displayed on the screen behind him. I heard him say my name again, his voice echoing slightly through my phone's tiny speaker, followed by the words, and the grand prize of $250,000. The money, in that moment, was secondary. The true prize was the sudden, radical, and irreversible shift in power. For 5 years, they had held all the emotional power over me. They held my love, my loyalty, my desperate, childish need for their approval. And now, I held something they understood far better than passion, integrity, or talent. I held status, and I held money. In that instant, a memory surfaced, not as a hazy recollection, but as a sharp, vivid scene. It was from 5 years ago, in the sterile, impersonal conference room of a lawyer's office, the day after I had secretly bought their house back from the brink. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Isabella Rossi, had insisted on this meeting. My parents and Leo were there, still dazed and shell-shocked from their financial collapse. I had presented them with a thick stack of papers. It's just some formalities for the bank's leaseback program, I had explained, my voice steady as I delivered the lie I'd concocted to protect their fragile pride. It's just standard procedure to document everything. I remember the scene perfectly. My father, the once great financial advisor, had barely glanced at the documents. Yes, whatever it is, just tell me where to sign, he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand, impatient to put the whole embarrassing episode behind him. Leo had been too busy scrolling through his phone, probably looking for a new job he would never seriously pursue, to even read the cover page. My mother just signed where my father pointed. They signed everything without a second thought. But it wasn't a formality. It was an ironclad, multi-page, professionally drafted loan agreement. It had been drafted by Isabella, a specialist in financial litigation, and notarized on the spot. It stipulated, in painstakingly clear legal language, that the full market value of the house, which I had paid in cash, plus all subsequent payments for property taxes, utilities, insurance, and essential maintenance that I paid on their behalf, were to be considered a personal loan from me to them, jointly and severally. It further stipulated that the monthly stipend provided to Leo was also a loan, with a modest but accumulating interest rate. The agreement had a crucial, lethal clause. The entire outstanding sum was due, in full, upon my written request with 60 days' notice. At the time, signing that document felt like a cynical, defensive measure, a worst-case scenario protection that I prayed I would never have to use. My intention wasn't to become their landlord or their creditor. I just wanted to save my family from ruin. But standing there in that dark study, their laughter and my father's cruel, dismissive words still ringing in my ears, I realized with a chilling certainty that the worst-case scenario had arrived. I hadn't just been documenting their financial dependency. I had been meticulously chronicling their emotional bankruptcy. My secret weapon wasn't the award or the $250,000 prize. It was the truth. All of it. documented and undeniable. For 5 years, I had maintained a private, password-protected, cloud-based spreadsheet. Every mortgage payment, every tax bill, every wire transfer for Leo's stipend, every exorbitant grocery bill I had covered for their dinner parties, it was all there, dated, categorized, and linked to a bank statement. The total was staggering, far more than I had allowed myself to consciously acknowledge. They owed me over $600,000, not including the original value of the house itself. I also had a folder on my encrypted hard drive labeled simply Family. It contained high-resolution scans of the signed and notarized loan agreement, but it also held screenshots of every manipulative text message, every guilt-tripping email from my mother, every dismissive response they'd ever sent about my work. I had, without realizing it, built a legal fortress. A plan began to form in my mind, cold, precise, and beautiful as a perfectly rendered blueprint. I would not confront them tonight. I would not ruin their perfect party with an unseemly, emotional scene. That was their style, not mine. I would let them have their moment of smug triumph. I would let them continue to believe they were the successful patriarchs of a resilient family, and that I was their pitiable, artistic failure. The real confrontation would come later. It would be on my terms, in my space, and under my control. They would find out about the award on their own. Leo was pathologically obsessed with social media. He or Tiffany would surely see it trending in the local news by morning. And they would come to me, not with an apology, but with their hands out. They would see the prize money as their due, another unexpected resource to be absorbed into the family coffers. They would demand it, and I would be ready. I took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed down the silk of my dress, and deleted Alistair's texts from my phone. I walked out of the study and back into the glittering party. I put on my neutral, placid expression, the mask I had perfected over years of practice. I found my parents, who were now standing near the entrance, accepting fawning goodbyes from their departing guests. "I'm feeling a bit tired. I think I'll head back to the guest house now," I said quietly, my voice even. "Oh, all right, dear," my mother said, patting my arm distractedly, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. "Thank you well, for everything." The word hung in the air between us, so utterly devoid of its true, monumental meaning. "Get some rest, Serafina," my father added, his tone once again that of a benevolent, slightly disappointed parent speaking to a fragile, emotional child. "And don't take my little toast too seriously. We're all very proud of you, really." I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. As I walked across the manicured lawn toward the darkness of my guest house, I felt a profound, almost out-of-body sense of detachment. I was looking at my life from a great height, seeing the whole rotten, beautiful, complicated structure of it. For years, I had been trying to renovate a building with a failed, crumbling foundation. Now, I finally had the permit for a full demolition. The game had changed. They thought they were in control, basking in the warm glow of their perfect party. But they were about to walk, blindly and confidently, into a new reality I had been carefully constructing for 5 years. A reality built not of brick and mortar, but of receipts, records, and a debt they could never, ever hope to repay. The call came at 10:15 the next morning, just as I had predicted. I was sitting at my large drafting table, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand, staring out at the sun-drenched garden. I had been up all night, not in celebration, but in methodical preparation. I had printed every single document, the signed and notarized loan agreement, the 5-year spreadsheet of expenses with the grand total highlighted in a stark, unforgiving yellow, key screenshots of my mother's guilt-inducing text messages, and a freshly printed copy of the deed to the house, clearly showing my name as the sole owner. I had arranged it all in a sleek, professional-looking black binder, tabbed and organized like a client presentation. I felt strangely, preternaturally calm, like an architect reviewing the final, intricate plans just before the controlled demolition of a condemned building. My phone buzzed on the table. The caller ID read, "Leo." "Sarah!" he exclaimed. his voice a thick, viscous syrup of fake, jovial warmth I hadn't heard in years. "I just saw the news. A friend sent me the link. The National Vanguard Award. And $250,000. Why didn't you say anything? This is absolutely incredible. We're rich." The possessive plural we was instantaneous and reflexive. My win was, without a moment's hesitation, our wealth. "It all happened pretty fast last night," I said, my voice deliberately flat and neutral. "Well, this is no time for modesty. We need to celebrate, properly. Dad and Mom are ecstatic, they're practically floating. We're coming over to your office right now to pop some champagne." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration of imminent arrival. "I'll be here," I said, and hung up the phone. 20 minutes later, they arrived. A united front of triumphant expectation. They didn't bring champagne. They brought an agenda. My father strode in first, beaming, followed by my mother, with Leo and a smug-looking Tiffany trailing behind them. They filled my small office, their collective presence immediately making the space feel cramped, claustrophobic, and invaded. "Serafina! My goodness!" my father boomed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "I have to admit you certainly surprised us all. $250,000. All that time spent on your little drawings finally paid off, eh?" He was already reframing the narrative. My success wasn't due to a decade of relentless work, talent, or innovation. It was a fluke, a surprising lottery win that had finally justified my strange hobby. "We are so proud of you, darling," my mother added, though her eyes were darting around my modest office, assessing the worn furniture and stacks of blueprints with a faint air of disapproval. Of course, this is a huge, huge relief for the entire family. This money, it will solve so many of our lingering problems. Leo, unable to contain himself, jumped in, already ticking things off a mental list. "Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. First, we immediately pay off my credit card debt. It's only about 30 grand, a drop in the bucket. Then, Tiffany and I desperately need a new car. The minivan is an embarrassment, and it's on its last legs. A new German SUV would be perfect. And Dad, we can finally do that full kitchen renovation you and Mom have been dreaming about for years." "This is absolutely perfect," Tiffany chimed in. "And I'll need a new wardrobe for the club. Leo's new job will require a lot more entertaining." They spoke for 10 minutes straight, a dizzying, breathless whirlwind of demands disguised as a collective family plan. They had already allocated, budgeted, and spent every single dollar of my prize money without once asking me what I intended to do with it. Not once did they apologize for the public humiliation of the night before. Not once did they acknowledge the word failure. That entire painful episode had been completely and conveniently erased from their memory, replaced by this new, wonderful reality where my success was a shared family resource, a communal bank account they were now ready to draw from. I let them finish. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly on my desk, and listened. The silence that followed their breathless, entitled planning was heavy and suffocating. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. My father looked taken aback by my tone. "Well, yes. That's the basic outline. We can work out the specific details and transfers later today." "Good," I said. I reached for the sleek black binder. "Because I have a plan of my own that I would like to discuss." I slid the binder across the polished surface of the desk toward them. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. My father opened it, a look of mild, paternal annoyance on his face. His eyes fell on the first page, the bold, clear title, Loan Agreement. I watched, with a detached, clinical interest, as the color drained from his face. He flipped through the pages, his confident, patriarchal posture slowly deflating like a punctured tire. My mother leaned over his shoulder, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is all this legal jargon?" she whispered, a note of panic in her voice. "I don't understand." "Oh, that," I explained, my voice as steady and clear as a steel beam, "is the legally binding contract that all three of you signed in my lawyer's office 5 years ago, the one you dismissed as a mere formality. It states in no uncertain terms that the money I used to purchase this house and all subsequent expenses paid on your behalf constitute a personal loan. I pushed the thick, multi-page spreadsheet across the desk. And this is the itemized statement of that loan. It includes 5 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, home insurance, utilities, and Leo's generous monthly stipend. The grand total of your collective debt to me, as of this morning, is $647,281.54. A profound, stunned silence filled the room. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of my computer. Leo snatched the papers from my father, his eyes widening in disbelief as he scanned the long columns of numbers. "This is insane," he stammered, his face pale. "This has to be a joke, right? This is some kind of sick joke." "I assure you, it is no joke," I said. "It is a notarized legal document. My lawyer, Isabella Rossi, would be more than happy to discuss its validity and enforceability with your attorney, should you choose to hire one." "Oh." My mother collapsed into one of the client chairs, her hand fluttering to her heart. "Serafina, how could you do this to us? We're your family." "Yes, you are," I said, and for the first time, my voice trembled with the suppressed rage of 1,000 slights. "And last night, in front of 100 people, my family called me a failure. You stood on a stage in a house that I own, you drank wine that I paid for, and you publicly humiliated me for your own amusement. You have spent 5 years diminishing my life's work, ignoring my sacrifices, and treating me like an obligation. You do not get to invoke the word family only when you want something from me." "That was a misunderstanding," my father blustered, but his voice lacked all of its usual authority. It was thin and reedy. "A poor choice of words in a celebratory moment." "Was it?" I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a small, discreet digital voice recorder. I pressed play, and his voice filled the room, clear as day. "Every family has its successes and its failures, but we love them all the same. To family." I pressed stop. "Because I have a recording of the entire toast. I thought it might be useful to remember the exact choice of words." That was the final, devastating blow. They stared at me, their faces a canvas of shock, fury, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been completely and irrevocably inverted. "So, here is my plan," I said, standing up, feeling taller than I ever had in my life. "The $250,000 from the award will be considered a partial first payment against your outstanding debt. That leaves a remaining balance of just under $400,000. I walked to the window and looked out at the main house, their gilded cage. "This property, which is legally and solely mine, will be put on the market effective tomorrow morning. Once it sells, I will deduct the remaining balance of your debt from the proceeds. Whatever is left over, if anything, will be wired to an account of your choosing. You have 60 days to vacate the premises." "You're kicking us out?" my mother wailed, the words tearing from her throat. "You're kicking out your own family?" "No," I said, turning back to face them, my gaze unflinching and cold as ice. "I am foreclosing on a loan. It's a standard business procedure. You, of all people, Dad, should understand that." They just stared at me, utterly speechless. The architects of my humiliation, the arbiters of my failure, were finally seeing the structure they had truly built over the last 5 years. A mountain of debt they could not pay, and a daughter they had finally, irrevocably pushed too far. As they stood there, mouths agape, I delivered the final, quiet blow, one they never saw coming. "And Tiffany," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I'll be expecting my grandmother's sapphire necklace back before you leave today." "Oh?" The immediate aftermath of my announcement was not a quiet retreat. It was an explosion of pure, desperate chaos. The shock that had frozen them in place quickly curdled into sputtering, impotent rage. "You ungrateful, conniving brat!" my father roared, his face turning a blotchy, alarming shade of red. "After everything we have done for you, the upbringing, the opportunities we gave you." "Oh? The upbringing you gave me?" I shot back, the last of my lifelong deference incinerated in the fire of my newfound resolve. You gave me a crippling complex about my own worth, and a lifetime spent trying to earn your approval. The rest, the things that actually matter, I got for myself. My mother, seeing that anger was failing, resorted to her classic manipulation tactic: weaponized tears. I just can't believe my own daughter could be so cruel, so heartless, she sobbed, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. To make your own parents homeless in their old age. What will people say? What will the Abernathys think? They'll probably say what you've been saying for years, Mom, that you're a resilient family that has faced many challenges, I said, turning her own performative words back on her like a mirror. Now you'll finally have a chance to prove it. Oh, Leo, ever the opportunist, tried to find a new angle, to bargain his way out of the consequences. Come on, Sarah. Be reasonable about this. This is crazy. We can work something out. A payment plan. We don't have to be so drastic. Think of the kids. I have been reasonable for 5 years, Leo, I said, my voice now devoid of all emotion. My reason has been consistently misinterpreted as weakness. The time for negotiation is over. And yes, I am thinking of the kids. I'm thinking about what happens if they grow up watching you treat people this way. They stayed for another 20 minutes, their tactics shifting wildly as they grew more desperate. They cycled through threats of legal action, which I knew were empty, insults about my character, and then back to desperate, tearful pleas. Through it all, I remained unmoved, a calm, immovable object, against which their storm finally broke. I was no longer the quiet, accommodating Serafina they had created. The woman standing before them was the architect of her own life, and I was finally, after 38 years, claiming my own space. They left in a storm of slammed doors and furious, incoherent muttering, Tiffany having silently, resentfully, placed the sapphire necklace on my desk before storming out behind her husband. Once they were gone, the surge of adrenaline that had been coursing through me began to subside, leaving me shaky and utterly exhausted. I sank into my desk chair, the silence of the guest house suddenly deafening. I had done it. I had finally stood up for myself. But the victory felt terrifying and deeply lonely. I had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of my own life, and now I had to navigate the radioactive fallout. I picked up my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Isabella, my lawyer, to inform her that the plan was in motion. Good, she said, her voice crisp and full of approval. I'll get the official legal notices drafted and sent via courier this afternoon. Stay strong, Serafina. The hardest part is over. The second call was to my best friend, Anya, who knew the general, frustrating outline but not the specific, secret details of my family situation. Through a flood of tears that were 1 part relief, 1 part grief, and 1 part sheer terror, I told her everything. I am on my way, was all she said. An hour later, she arrived at my guest house with 2 large, greasy pizzas and a bottle of expensive, vintage champagne, real champagne. This is for the National Vanguard Award winner, she said, pulling me into a fierce, grounding hug. To hell with the rest of them. Tonight, we don't mourn. Tonight, we celebrate you. The next few weeks were a trial by fire. My phone was bombarded with vitriolic text messages from my parents. My brother sent long, rambling emails accusing me of being a sociopath who was destroying the family out of jealousy. Then came the calls from my aunts and uncles, the flying monkeys, who had only been fed my parents' hysterical, wildly inaccurate, one-sided version of the story. They called me selfish, cruel, and heartless for kicking my elderly parents out on the street. I stopped answering the phone. I set up a filter on my email to send their messages directly to a separate folder. I focused on the practical, necessary steps of dismantling my old life and building my new one. True to my word, I listed the house with a top real estate agent the very next day. The market was hot, and the house itself was beautiful, I had, after all, poured my own design sensibilities into its gradual restoration over the years. We had multiple, competing offers within the first week. While the sale was pending, I found my own place. It was something I had been dreaming of for years but never allowed myself to pursue. Using a portion of the prize money as a down payment, I bought a stunning, sun-drenched loft apartment in a converted 1,920 seconds textile warehouse downtown. It was everything the guest house wasn't. Open, expansive, filled with light, with 20-foot ceilings and massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city skyline. It had a large, separate space that would become my new, state-of-the-art studio. It was a space that was entirely, unequivocally, and gloriously mine. The day I signed the mortgage papers for my loft, a wave of profound peace, so deep it felt like a physical sensation, washed over me. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my lifelong companion began to dissipate. The gnawing fear of my family's disapproval, a fear which had unconsciously dictated so many of my choices, was simply gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, solid confidence I had never felt before. The sale of my parents' house closed exactly 60 days after the confrontation. As promised, I had Isabella's office handle the finances. She deducted their outstanding documented debt from the proceeds. After all was said and done, there was a little over $100,000 left. I had the cashier's check sent by registered mail to my father's new address, a small, generic, two-bedroom rental condo they had managed to find in a neighboring town, with a formal letter from my lawyer that simply stated, "This concludes the financial relationship between yourself and our client, Serafina Vance." Moving into my loft felt like the first true exhale I had taken in a decade. As Anya and I unpacked boxes, the sound of our easy laughter echoed in the vast, empty space. That first evening, after the movers had left, I stood alone at the massive window, looking out at the glittering tapestry of the city lights. They had spent years making me feel small and insignificant in that big, beautiful house. A house I had paid for but never truly felt at home in. But here, in my new sunlit apartment, surrounded by the city that had always inspired my work, I finally felt like I had enough room to breathe. 1 year later, I stood on the small steel and glass balcony of my loft, a warm evening breeze carrying the ambient sounds of the city up to me. In my hand, I held a copy of the latest issue of Architectural Digest. On the cover was a stunning twilight photograph of the Crestwood River Library, its innovative design glowing from within. And on the inside, a 10-page feature spread on my work, the headline reading, "Serafina Vance, the quiet visionary redefining public space." Life was not just different. It was a completely new design, built on a foundation of my own making. The Vanguard Award had been a rocket launch for my career, catapulting me from a respected but relatively unknown solo practitioner to a name in high demand. Winning wasn't just about the money or the prestige, it was about the platform it provided. Almost overnight, my small one-woman operation was fielding calls from clients I had only dreamed of working with. I was finally able to expand. I hired a small, brilliant team. 2 junior architects fresh out of grad school, with boundless energy and innovative ideas, and a sharp, efficient office manager who freed me to do what I do best: design. We called ourselves Vance Design Studio, and our new office, just a few blocks from my loft in a beautifully restored industrial building, was a constant, buzzing hub of creativity and collaboration. We were selective about our projects, a luxury I had never known before. We chose to work on community-focused buildings that had a real, positive impact: a state-of-the-art performing arts center for an underfunded public school, a sustainable, multi-family housing project, a beautifully designed and welcoming health clinic for a low-income neighborhood. The work was deeply meaningful, and for the first time in my life, my financial success felt perfectly aligned with my personal and ethical values. The prize money, combined with the proceeds from the house sale, had given me something far more valuable than wealth. It had given me freedom. The freedom to say no to projects that didn't inspire me, the freedom to invest in my own business and my team, and the freedom to build a life completely, unapologetically on my own terms. My relationship with my family, on the other hand, had been completely demolished and then slowly, cautiously, and painfully rebuilt on an entirely new foundation. The first few months after they moved out were a maelstrom of bitterness and recrimination. They refused to speak to me directly. communicating only through a series of angry, self-pitying emails from my brother, who blamed me for their downfall and humiliation. The reality of their new circumstances was a harsh adjustment. They had to sell most of their expensive furniture and my mother's jewelry to afford the deposit and first month's rent on their new condo. My father, stripped of his grand house and the social status it provided, fell into a deep, silent depression. My mother, forced to manage a household budget for the first time in her life, was overwhelmed, resentful, and lost. Leo had to get a real entry-level job at a logistics company, and the shocking loss of his stipend and the lavish lifestyle it had supported put an immense, almost breaking strain on his marriage to Tiffany. They were forced, for the first time, to live within their own means, and they found the experience profoundly unpleasant. The turning point, the first crack of light in the darkness, came about 6 months in. I received a hesitant, awkward phone call from my mother. Her voice was different, stripped of its usual imperious tone. It was quieter, fragile. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, choosing a neutral, anonymous cafe downtown. When she walked in, I was struck by how much she had aged. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped. She told me that my father had finally started seeing a therapist at her desperate urging. She admitted, in a halting, difficult confession, that they had been living in a fantasy world for years, a world propped up by my money and their own profound denial. "We never truly saw you, Serafina," she said, her hands trembling as she stirred her coffee. Her eyes, for the first time I could remember, were filled with a sad, genuine remorse. We were so obsessed with the image of what we thought our family should be, with keeping up appearances, that we never saw the incredible, talented, and generous woman our daughter had become. We took everything from you, your money, your kindness, your patience, and we gave you absolutely nothing in return. I am so deeply sorry. It was the apology I had waited my entire life to hear. It didn't magically erase the years of hurt, but it was an acknowledgement. It was a start. It opened a door that had been sealed shut, with pride and denial. From there, we began the slow, arduous process of building something new. Our relationship now has firm, clear, non-negotiable boundaries. We meet for dinner once a month. In a public restaurant, we do not discuss finances ever. They have never asked me for another dollar, and I have never offered. My father, through his therapy, has begun to understand the profound and lasting damage his words and his dismissiveness caused. He has spoken to me, awkwardly but honestly, about his own deep-seated insecurities, his terror of being seen as a failure, and how he cruelly projected that fear onto me. It's a work in progress, but for the very first time in our lives, we are having honest conversations. Leo and I still have a more distant relationship. The resentment lingered longer for him. The entitled prince forced to live like a commoner. But seeing his parents begin to change, to take accountability, has slowly softened him. He and Tiffany are still together, learning to navigate their new reality. Last month, in a shocking turn of events, he called me to ask for my professional opinion on a small renovation they were planning for their modest townhouse. It was the first time he had ever acknowledged or valued my expertise. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. I've come to understand that what happened wasn't just about money or respect. It was about breaking a deeply dysfunctional family system that had been in place for generations. By refusing to continue playing my assigned role as the dutiful, invisible, and endlessly forgiving daughter, I had forced everyone, including myself, to find a new, healthier way of relating to one another. My life is full now, in ways that have nothing to do with magazine covers or bank accounts. My friendships, especially with Anya and Professor Finch, have deepened into a chosen family. I'm even tentatively starting to date someone, a landscape architect named Julian who finds my passion for my work inspiring, not threatening. We build things together, both literally and figuratively, and the relationship is built on mutual respect and admiration. Last week, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new public school arts center I had designed. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of hopeful students, dedicated teachers, and proud community members, I saw my parents standing near the back. They weren't there for the status or the photo opportunity. They were just there to support me. My father caught my eye and gave me a small, almost shy, but undeniably proud nod. It wasn't the loud, public validation I had once so desperately craved. It was quiet. It was real. And after everything, it was more than enough. I had finally built a life on my own foundation, a structure strong enough to withstand any storm. But standing there, I realized there was one last, crucial lesson I had to learn and fully embrace on my own terms. Looking back on that tumultuous year, it's easy to romanticize the confrontation as the defining moment. The dramatic scene in my guest house office, the sleek black binder of evidence, the finality of my decision it all makes for a compelling, satisfying story of triumph. But the real, fundamental change didn't happen in that single moment of explosive power. It happened in the thousands of quiet, mundane moments that followed. The first night I slept soundly through the night in my new loft, untroubled by the familiar weight of their expectations. The first time I signed a paycheck for an employee of my own company, feeling a surge of pride in what I was building. The first time my mother's apology sounded not just regretful, but truly repentant. The ultimate victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in the slow, steady, and deliberate process of proving to myself that I could build a life that didn't require their approval or permission to be valid and beautiful. For most of my adult life, I operated under a deeply flawed architectural principle. The illusion that if I just worked harder, gave more, achieved more, and sacrificed more, I would eventually earn their respect. I thought their validation was a prize I could win, a promotion I could earn through sheer effort. But the greatest and most painful lesson I learned was that you cannot get water from a dry well. You cannot force someone to see your worth if they are fundamentally committed to their own narrative of your failure. Their perception of me was never truly about me. It was a reflection of them. It was about their own insecurities, their crushing disappointments, and their desperate, lifelong need to maintain a fragile sense of superiority. My quiet, independent success threatened that narrative, so they had to diminish it, to mock it, to label it a failure. Trying to win their approval was like trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. No matter how beautiful the design, it was always destined to collapse. The real foundation, I discovered, had to be excavated and poured from within. The moment I stopped seeking their validation was the moment I truly became free. My worth isn't determined by a parental toast at an anniversary party, nor is it defined by a prestigious award from a guild. It's defined by the integrity of my work, the quality of my friendships, the kindness and empathy I try to put back into the world, and the quiet, unshakable pride I feel when I look at a project I've poured my heart and soul into. It's the strength to build and maintain boundaries, not as an act of punishment or revenge, but as a necessary act of architectural and emotional self-preservation. My family and I are healing, but our relationship will never be what it once was, and that is a profoundly good thing. The old version was a toxic, unstable structure built on a rotten foundation of obligation, guilt, and deep-seated denial. The new version, fragile as it may be, is being built on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. It requires me to be vigilant about my boundaries, and it requires them to take responsibility for their own lives and their own happiness. It's not the perfect, idealized family my mother always dreamed of projecting to the world, but for the first time, it's real. The money from the award and the house was a powerful tool, a catalyst for change. It gave me the means to escape and the resources to rebuild. But the real prize was the brutal clarity that came with the chaos. It forced me to see the unvarnished truth of my situation and gave me the courage to finally act on it. The most valuable structure I have ever designed is not a library or an art center. It is the life I have now, a life built to my own specifications, on a foundation of unwavering self-respect. So now I want to ask you, have you ever found yourself working tirelessly for the approval of someone? A parent? A partner? A boss who was never going to give it to you? What was that moment of clarity when you realized you had to stop seeking validation from others and start building it for yourself? Please, share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and I truly believe our stories have the power to help each other feel a little less alone in our struggles. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to hear more real-life stories about finding your own strength and redesigning your life. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth is not up for debate. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, you are the architect of your own life. You hold the blueprints. Build something magnificent.